London, July 1818. The lanterns of Vauxhall Gardens glowed softly through the summer night, while music drifted across the crowded walkways. Gentlemen in fine coats and ladies in silk gowns moved through the illuminated paths, their laughter mixing with the scent of roses and warm evening air. Masks and domino cloaks gave the evening a feeling of mystery. It was a place where secrets could hide easily. Miss Georgiana Sutton stood quietly near a wall of climbing roses, while watching the crowd from the shadows. Her black domino cloak hid most of her simple gown, though it could not hide the truth entirely. Anyone who looked closely would see that the fabric was modest and carefully mended. She knew very well how she appeared beside the glittering guests around her. At 23 years old, Georgiana understood exactly what London society thought of her. She was the daughter of Sir Edmund Sutton, or the man who had fled England 5 years earlier under accusations of treason. The scandal had destroyed her family overnight. Her father had escaped across the Channel, while his wife died of heartbreak soon after. Their fortune vanished. Their friends disappeared. What remained was shame. It followed Georgiana everywhere. No matter that she had done nothing wrong, no matter that she spent 2 days every week volunteering at the Foundling Hospital, but no matter that she lived quietly and behaved with perfect respectability. To society, she would always be one thing: a traitor's daughter. Her only living relative, an aging aunt in Cornwall, was too sick to travel. Georgiana survived in London alone, existing quietly on what little remained of the family funds, which was why the invitation puzzled her. Earlier that week, a sealed card had arrived bearing the crest of Wickliffe House, the powerful family of the Marquis of Wickliffe, and she had stared at the invitation for a long time before daring to believe it was meant for her. Why someone of such rank would invite her remained a mystery. Georgiana had decided to attend anyway. For one night she wished to feel normal again. The soft music of violins floated across the gardens as couples passed her arm in arm. Laughter echoed from the nearby pavilion, where wine flowed freely. She was about to leave when 3 figures stepped from the darker path beyond the roses, but they moved slowly and deliberately. Georgiana felt her stomach tighten the moment she recognized them. Lord Ravenscar, Sir Neville Crofton, and Mr. Hartley Vane. All 3 were well known in society, though not for honorable reasons. Their reputations were whispered about in drawing rooms. Men who drank too much, gambled too heavily, and took pleasure in humiliating those weaker than themselves. The path behind Georgiana was suddenly blocked. They had surrounded the arbor where she stood. Ravenscar spoke first. His voice carried the rough edge of wine. "Miss Sutton, what a surprise to find you here tonight." His smile held no warmth. "One would almost think Vauxhall Gardens was above your current station." Georgiana kept her voice calm, though her fingers tightened around her fan. "I received an invitation. I have every right to attend." Sir Neville Crofton laughed loudly. "Rights?" he said mockingly. "Your father owed my father £5,000 when he fled England. A debt of honor does not vanish simply because a coward runs away." Georgiana stepped back until the wooden trellis touched her shoulders. "I am not responsible for my father's debts." Hartley Vane moved closer, his eyes dark with amusement. "We are not discussing the law, Miss Sutton." His voice lowered. "We are discussing payment." The garden around them suddenly felt very quiet. The music from the pavilion seemed distant. "You have no brother," Ravenscar continued coldly. "No husband to answer for your father's disgrace, so we have decided to collect from you instead." Fear spread slowly through Georgiana's chest. "You cannot do this." Crofton shrugged. "Watch us." Before she could move, Ravenscar's hand struck her across the face. The force sent her stumbling into the rose bushes. Sharp thorns tore through the fabric of her gown and scratched her arms. The taste of blood filled her mouth where her lip had split, and the three men watched with cruel satisfaction. "You thought charity work would save you?" Vane sneered. "Thought smiling politely at the Marquis of Wickliffe in the park would make him protect you." He leaned closer. "You are nothing but a traitor's daughter." Georgiana tried to stand, but Crofton's boot slammed into her ribs. Pain exploded through her chest. The breath rushed from her lungs as she collapsed into the mud between the rose bushes, and her gown tore as Ravenscar grabbed the delicate fabric and threw her down again. More thorns cut into her palms as she tried to catch herself. "Tell Wickliffe something for us," Ravenscar said calmly. "Tell him his protection ends tonight." Rain began to fall lightly through the branches above them. "You are nothing," Crofton added, "and you will always be nothing." The sound of carriage wheels suddenly rolled across the gravel road nearby. All three men froze. They exchanged quick glances. Without another word, they disappeared into the darkness, fleeing through the garden paths. Georgiana lay trembling among the roses. The world spun around her. Blood dripped slowly from her lip onto the torn bodice of her gown. Just one eye was already swelling shut, and every breath sent sharp pain through her ribs. She tried to stand. Her legs refused. Tears blurred her vision as the distant carriage came to a halt somewhere beyond the trees. Footsteps approached along the gravel path. Slow, measured, controlled. A tall figure appeared at the entrance to the arbor, silhouetted against the lantern light behind him. The Marquis of Wickliffe. He stopped instantly. For a moment he said nothing, and his steel-gray eyes swept across the scene with the calm precision of a battlefield commander. Torn gown, blood on her face, mud on her knees, thorns embedded in her palms. The air around him seemed to grow colder. When he moved, it was swift and controlled. He crossed the space between them in 3 long strides and knelt beside her in the mud without caring about his expensive evening coat. His hand gently lifted her chin so the lantern light fell across her injuries. And his touch was steady, dangerously gentle. "Who did this to you?" His voice was soft, too soft. Georgiana tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Fear and pain filled her chest, but beneath it, something else appeared. Hope. The Marquis asked again, his voice now edged with iron. "Give me their names." Georgiana swallowed painfully. "Lord Ravenscar," she whispered. "Sir Neville Crofton." "Mr. Hartley Vane." She struggled for breath. "They said I owed them a debt." "Well, they said your protection ends tonight." For a moment, the Marquis said nothing. His eyes darkened as something shifted behind them. A decision. A line being crossed. Without another word, he removed his coat and wrapped it carefully around her trembling body. Then he lifted her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. She gasped softly when the movement jarred her ribs, but his arms adjusted instantly to ease the pain. "I am taking you to Wickliffe House," he said quietly, "so Mrs. Dalton will care for your injuries." Georgiana knew what such a decision meant. A single woman spending the night in the home of an unmarried marquis would destroy her reputation forever. But looking at the hard set of his jaw, she realized something important. Her reputation had already been destroyed long ago. She let her head rest weakly against his shoulder as he carried her toward the waiting carriage. Behind them, the roses swayed in the night wind. And somewhere in the darkness of London, 3 men had just made the greatest mistake of their lives. The carriage rolled through the dark streets of London, while rain fell softly against the windows. Inside, Georgiana rested weakly against the Marquis of Wickliffe. His arm supported her shoulders, while the other steadied her whenever the carriage hit a rough stone in the road. He had not spoken since they left Vauxhall Gardens. but the silence was not calm, and it felt like standing near a storm that had not yet broken. Georgiana could feel the tension in him. His body was rigid, controlled, but beneath that control, something far more dangerous waited. Pain pulsed through her ribs with every breath. Her lip throbbed, and one eye had nearly swollen shut. She tried to sit straighter, but the movement sent another sharp ache through her chest. Immediately, his arm adjusted. "Do not move," he said quietly. His voice was calm, but it carried authority that could not be questioned. They soon arrived before the tall iron gates of Wickliffe House. The grand residence stood silent beneath the lantern light, its stone walls dark against the cloudy sky. The carriage stopped. Without waiting for assistance, the Marquis stepped out and lifted Georgiana again in his arms. The front doors opened at once. The two footmen stood frozen in surprise as their master carried a wounded young woman through the entrance hall. "Mrs. Dalton," Wickliffe said sharply. The housekeeper appeared almost immediately. She had served the household for over 20 years, and nothing in London shocked her easily. But when she saw Georgiana's face, her expression hardened. "Oh, heavens! Prepare the guest chamber," the Marquis ordered calmly. "Hot water, clean bandages." Mrs. Dalton nodded without hesitation. "At once, oh my lord." Within minutes, Georgiana lay on a chaise near the fire in one of the upstairs guest rooms. Mrs. Dalton gently cleaned the blood from her lip, while another servant brought fresh cloths and warm water. The Marquis stood near the door watching. He had removed his coat and rolled back his sleeves. Mud from the garden still stained his trousers, yet he made no attempt to change. His gray eyes never left Georgiana. Mrs. Dalton carefully pressed a cool cloth to the swelling near her eye. "You were fortunate his lordship arrived when he did," the housekeeper murmured softly. "These bruises are serious." Georgiana tried to smile. "I suppose I was." The door opened quietly as the Marquis stepped forward. "How badly is she injured?" Mrs. Dalton studied the bruises again. "Her ribs are badly bruised but not broken. The cuts will heal. She must rest for several weeks." He nodded once. "See that she has everything she needs." He turned toward the door. "My lord," Mrs. Dalton called after him. "Where are you going at this hour?" The Marquis paused. His voice remained calm. "I have errands." Then he left. But Georgiana heard his footsteps moving down the long marble staircase before the front door closed quietly. Mrs. Dalton glanced toward the door with a knowing look. "I have never seen him look like that," she said quietly. "What do you mean?" The housekeeper dipped a cloth into warm water. "Like a man about to settle a debt." 2 hours later, the Marquis of Wickliffe stood outside a modest townhouse in Holborn. The streets were nearly empty at this hour, while only a few lanterns burned in the dark windows of nearby buildings. He knocked firmly. After several moments, the door opened, and a tired young clerk appeared, holding a candle. The Marquis did not waste time. "Wake Mr. Finch." The clerk blinked in confusion. "It is nearly 2 in the morning." "Then wake him faster." 20 minutes later, Samuel Finch sat across from the Marquis in his cluttered office. The solicitor wore a hastily thrown robe over his nightclothes and looked increasingly uneasy as Wickliffe spoke. "I require information," the Marquis said. His voice was cold and precise. "I want every financial record connected to Lord Ravenscar, Sir Neville Crofton, and Mr. Hartley Vane." Finch frowned. "My lord, that could take weeks. You have until dawn." The solicitor stared at him. "I will pay triple your usual fee." The room fell silent. Finch slowly reached for his coat. "I will begin immediately." From there, the Marquis traveled across the city without rest. His next stop was a tavern in 7 Dials. The place smelled of smoke and stale ale. A few rough-looking men sat around wooden tables drinking quietly. At the back corner sat Sergeant Briggs, a retired soldier, who had once served under Wickliffe's late brother. Briggs stood the moment he saw him. "My lord, I need men," the Marquis said. "Men who can watch 3 houses tonight, but they must see everything. Visitors, letters, movements." Briggs studied his expression carefully. "How many?" "6. Briggs nodded slowly. "You will have them within the hour." The Marquis left another pouch of coins on the table. By 3 in the morning, he stood inside the private office of Lord Hawthorne, owner of the largest private bank in Mayfair. The elderly banker looked extremely uncomfortable. "My lord, surely this discussion could wait until morning." Wickliffe placed a folded document on the desk. Hawthorne glanced down, and his eyes widened. It was a bank draft for an enormous sum. "Lord Ravenscar holds several notes with your bank," the Marquis said calmly. "I would like them called in tomorrow." Hawthorne swallowed. "But that would ruin him." "Yes," Wickliffe replied quietly. The banker slowly opened a drawer and removed several ledgers. By 4 in the morning, another stop was made. This time, the Marquis visited a printing house on Fleet Street. Within the hour, the presses began working. Hundreds of broadsheets were prepared, describing shocking evidence of financial fraud connected to Lord Ravenscar. Forged signatures, illegal loans, secret debts. Everything carefully documented. Everything ready to be delivered across London at dawn. By 5 in the morning, Wickliffe stood inside the office of a Bow Street magistrate. If formal complaints of assault were recorded, witness statements prepared, warrants would soon follow. Throughout the entire night, the Marquis never raised his voice, never displayed anger, but his plans moved forward with frightening precision. Each step tightened the net around the 3 men who had attacked Georgiana. When the first light of morning touched the rooftops of London, Wickliffe finally returned home. He paused outside the guest chamber where Georgiana slept. Through the door, he heard her steady breathing. Only then did he allow himself a slow breath. But the night was not finished. Across the city, chaos had already begun. Lord Ravenscar woke to the sound of shouting outside his townhouse. Street vendors were selling newspapers and broadsheets. The headlines spread across every page. Evidence of forgery and fraud by Lord Ravenscar. He grabbed the paper with shaking hands. Every crime was listed in brutal detail. Before noon, officers would arrive. Sir Neville Crofton received a letter from his bank during breakfast. His estate loan had been called in. £30,000 due immediately. He stared at the letter in disbelief. If he could not pay, everything would be taken. His land, his house, his title. Meanwhile, Mr. Hartley Vane discovered something far worse. Creditors appeared at his door, demanding repayment of debts he did not know existed. Investments vanished. Friends refused to see him. His uncle disowned him by letter. By mid-morning, London society buzzed with rumors. 3 powerful men were collapsing at the same time. Fortunes vanishing overnight. Reputations destroyed. No one spoke the name responsible. But everyone knew. The Marquis of Wickliffe had begun his work, and he was not finished yet. London society moved quickly when scandal appeared. Within days, the entire city whispered about the sudden downfall of 3 powerful men. Newspapers carried new accusations each morning. Creditors gathered like vultures. Doors that had once opened easily were suddenly closed. Lord Ravenscar collapsed first. The evidence printed in the broadsheets was impossible to ignore. Forged signatures, illegal debts, stolen funds hidden for years. Within weeks, the court stripped him of his estates. His title was disgraced, and he was sentenced to transportation across the sea. The proud lord who once walked through Mayfair with arrogance was placed in chains. Sir Neville Crofton lasted a little longer. But when his enormous debts were called in, he had no way to repay them. His land was sold, his family house emptied. Every painting and piece of silver disappeared into auctions. In the end, he accepted a miserable post as a small church official in the remote Scottish Highlands, far from London, far from society, forgotten. But the third man remained, Mr. Hartley Vane. For several weeks he believed he had escaped the storm. He watched the destruction of his friends and quietly told himself he had not been discovered. He continued visiting his gentlemen's club and dining with acquaintances as if nothing had happened. But the Marquis of Wickliffe had been waiting, patiently. To one evening in late August, the doors of White's Club opened and a tall, dark figure stepped inside. Conversation slowed immediately. The Marquis of Wickliffe rarely visited such places. His reputation alone was enough to quiet a room. Across the chamber, Hartley Vane sat comfortably in a leather chair near the fireplace reading a newspaper. He did not notice the Marquis' approach until a shadow fell across the table. Vane looked up. The color drained from his face. The Marquis sat down across from him slowly. "Mr. Vane," he said calmly, "how fortunate to find you here." Vane forced a weak smile. "Lord Wickliffe, I did not expect the pleasure." The entire room had fallen silent. Every gentleman present pretended not to watch while listening closely. The Marquis rested one gloved hand on the table. "You planned the attack at Vauxhall Gardens." Vane froze. "I do not know what you mean." "You selected the location," Wickliffe continued quietly. You told Ravenscar where she would be standing." Vane's breathing became shallow. "You watched from the shadows while 3 men beat a defenseless woman." The words hung in the air like ice. "I have no proof of that," Vane whispered desperately. The Marquis leaned forward slightly. "You mistake me," he said softly. "I do not require proof." Several men at nearby tables quietly moved farther away. Wickliffe continued speaking with the calm voice of a man discussing the weather. Lord Ravenscar has been transported across the sea. Sir Neville Crofton now lives in exile." He paused. "And now we arrive at you." Vane's hands began to tremble. "What do you want?" The Marquis stood slowly. His shadow fell across the table. "You owe a debt." Vane swallowed hard. "I can pay money." The Marquis gave a faint smile. "You have no money." He placed a folded document on the table. "Your debts have been called in this morning." Vane stared at the paper with horror. My uncle has also withdrawn his support." "And your mistress has already left." Vane's voice broke. "What will happen to me?" The Marquis leaned down until his voice was barely above a whisper. "You will leave England tonight." Vane stared up at him. "Leave? There is a ship departing for France at dawn," Wickliffe said calmly. "You will board it. You will never return. And you will never speak Miss Sutton's name again." The room remained completely silent. Vane's shoulders began to shake. "Please," he whispered. "Louder," the Marquis said. Vane lowered his head. "Please, Lord Wickliffe. I beg you." The words echoed through the club. Every man present would remember the moment. The once confident gentleman now begging for mercy. Wickliffe straightened his coat calmly. "You believed silence meant weakness. You were wrong." Without another word, he turned and walked out of the club. By morning, Hartley Vane had vanished from London. His ship left before sunrise. He carried only a small bag and the memory of his humiliation. The debt had been paid. Meanwhile, at Wickliffe House, Georgiana slowly healed. Mrs. Dalton watched over her with fierce care. Bruises faded. Cuts closed. Each day she grew a little stronger. For 2 weeks she rarely left her bed. But eventually, she could walk again. One quiet morning, she stood beside the window of the guest chamber, watching rain fall across the garden. Her ribs still ached, but the worst of the pain had passed. A knock sounded on the door. "Miss Sutton," Mrs. Dalton said gently. "His lordship has returned and would like to see you in the library." Georgiana's heart began to beat faster. Well, she had not seen him since that night. When she entered the library, the Marquis stood beside the fireplace reading a document. He looked up immediately. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he closed the folder and set it aside. "You are feeling stronger." "Yes," Georgiana replied softly. He studied her carefully. "The men who attacked you have been dealt with." She lowered her eyes. "I heard rumors." He stepped closer. "I would do it again." She looked up. Why?" The question seemed to surprise him. "Because they hurt you." The answer was simple. Georgiana felt tears gathering in her eyes. "My lord, you did not have to ruin them for my sake." His voice softened. "I did not do it only for you." He hesitated. "I did it because I could not bear the thought of you suffering while they walked free." The words filled the room with quiet emotion. He stepped closer. "There is something else I must say." Georgiana waited. For 5 years I have watched you from a distance," he continued quietly. "At church, in the park, at the hospital where you volunteered." Her eyes widened in surprise. "I admired your strength long before that night." He took her hands gently. "You believe yourself alone in the world. But you never were." He took a small velvet box from his coat pocket. When he opened it, a diamond ring glimmered inside. "Georgiana Sutton," he said softly. "Will you marry me?" Tears slipped down her cheeks. "You know what people will say." "I do not care." His voice was firm. "I care only about you." Georgiana smiled through her tears. "Then yes, I will marry you." The quiet library filled with a feeling neither of them had expected. Hope. 3 weeks later, they were married in the small chapel of Wickliffe House. It was a simple ceremony with only a few close witnesses. But to Georgiana, it felt like the beginning of a new life. Months later, she stood beside Julian Wickliffe on the balcony of their country estate, watching the sunset across the open fields. The world had once treated her as invisible. Now she stood beside the man who had seen her when no one else had. Julian wrapped his arm around her gently. "Do you still think about that night?" he asked. "Sometimes," she said, "but it no longer frightens me." "Why not?" She smiled. "Because now I know someone will always ask the question." He looked at her. What question?" Georgiana leaned her head against his shoulder. "The one that changed everything," she whispered softly. "Who did this?"